The genie is out of the bottle, and the eventual consequences of this research will follow. Earlier this year, the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Italy unearthed a new face for the famous 5,300-year-old mummy named Otzi. Otzi was found in 1991 by two German tourists in the Ötztal Alps on the border between Austria and Italy. Helmut and Erika Simon found the body lying face down, frozen in the ice, on September 19th. At first, it was thought to be a modern corpse, similar to others that had been recently found in the region. Australian authorities crudely removed the mummy with a small jackhammer and ice axes, and not under typical archaeological standards. Some portions of its clothes and tools were taken by spectators. Scientists over the years have been able to mine a wealth of information about Otzi and his life. They estimate the age of the mummy at 5,300 years old, with Otzi living between 3350 to 3100 BC. He stood 5 foot 5 inches tall and weighed about 110 pounds, and was about 45 years old when he died. Analysis of pollens, dust, and isotopic composition of his tooth enamel indicates that during his childhood he had lived near the present-day village of Feldthurns, but later in life went to live in a valley 50 kilometers north of that location. His lungs were blackened, probably from constantly breathing campfire smoke. Analysis of his DNA has shown him to be related to modern Europeans, but his particular subgroup has little to no known modern descendants, possibly due to the fact that the genetic strain this genetic strain has high rates of infertility. Otzi's stomach contents revealed his last two meals: camus meat and red deer meat, both eaten with encorn grain as well as roots and fruits. Analysis of pollens in the stomach contents put his death in springtime. High levels of copper and arsenic were contained in the mummy's hair, indicating that he was involved in copper smelting. Otzi had an intestinal parasite called whipworm. Several carbon tattoos were found on his body, groups of short parallel vertical lines on both sides of the lumbar spine, a cuneiform mark behind the right knee, and various marks around the ankles. It is believed that the tattoos were part of or the result of a type of acupuncture treatment for pain relief for the back and joints. Radiological examination of the tattooed area shows signs of strain and deterioration. The mummy was clothed in a cloak made of woven grass, a coat, a belt, leggings, and a loincloth, and shoes made of different types of animal leather. The shoes were waterproof and designed to walk in snow. The belt had a pouch sewn into it which contained a scraper, a drill, flint flakes, bone awl, and dried fungus. Other items found with the body were a copper axe with a yew wood handle, a flint-bladed knife, and a quiver of 14 arrows. Two were broken with flint tips and had stabilizing fins. The rest of the arrows were unfinished and untipped. Also, an unfinished longbow, 72 inches long, was found. Initial speculation on Otzi's cause of death was death by exposure to a winter storm. In 2001, an X-ray and CT scans were done. They gave a more complete accounting of what had killed Otzi. The mummy had an arrowhead lodged in his left shoulder when he died, and his coat also had a corresponding tear in the same area. This would have been fatal. The arrow shaft was removed before his death. Bruises and cuts were found on the hands, wrist, and chest. The body also had cerebral trauma, indicating a blow to the head. The evidence is clear that Otzi was killed in a fight or some type of ritual sacrifice. The South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology commissioned two reconstruction artists to recreate the mummy's face using forensic science, 3D images of the skull, and artistic technique. The new reconstruction is part of the museum's celebration of 20 years since the mummy has been discovered. German scientists studying the contents of an ancient bottle that once belonged to Queen Hatshepsut of Egypt may have found evidence of what caused her death. Hatshepsut ruled as Pharaoh of Egypt for 22 years and likely has a link to Moses and the Exodus. Hatshepsut probably lived from 1533 to 1483 BC. Her name means foremost of noble ladies. She was the only living heir born from Thutmose I and her mother, Queen Ammos. the primary wife to the pharaoh. Tutmosis I would have sons from other wives. Their claims to being pharaoh were less legitimate because it was through the primary wife that the future pharaoh was supposed to descend from. Egyptian royal custom permitted the marriage of siblings to preserve the royal bloodline, and thus became the means by which Tutmosis II would become pharaoh. Since he was a son from a lesser wife, Tutmosis II and Hatshepsut's marriage would only produce one daughter and no male heir, although like his father before him, he would have a son through a lesser wife. This son was Tutmosis III. When Tutmosis II died at a young age in 1504 BC, Hatshepsut became co-regent with her stepson Tutmosis III. Hatshepsut would have been around 30 years of age at this time, while Tutmosis III was still a child, possibly an infant. His mummy bears this out because he ruled for 50 years, and his mummy shows a body that is not extremely old. By year 7 of her reign, she has dropped her title as queen and starts ruling as pharaoh. 6 years before her death, all official records of her cease after 22 years of rule. She passes away. Because some of her monuments and statues were defaced, it was thought that she may have been murdered by Tutmosis III, but this was based more on speculation than any solid evidence. Hatshepsut's death would remain a relative mystery due to no known historical account of the cause of her passing. Scientists studying her mummy had suspected the possibility of cancer. Recently, scientists investigated the contents of a bottle that belonged to her. The contents held the remnants of an ancient skincare ointment. The ointment contained creosote and asphalt. These ingredients are known to cause cancer. Many of the 18th dynasty bloodlines suffered from skin diseases, from Hatshepsut through Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. Constant use of this skin cream may have triggered the cancer in her body, and may have ultimately killed her. Her connection to Moses and the Exodus begins with her role as Pharaoh's daughter, a title that few held in ancient Egypt, but she did. The biblical timeline puts the Exodus at 1446 to 1445 BC, and not in the 1200 BC date that archaeologists typically push, although in recent years some have begun to acknowledge that the late date for the Exodus is wrong. Moses was born around 1525 BC. This would make Hatshepsut around 6 to 8 years old when she found Moses on the Nile. Moses would flee Egypt after killing the Egyptian taskmaster in 1485 BC, 2 years approximately before Hatshepsut's death. The defacing of Hatshepsut's monuments could possibly be due to her role in saving Moses' life and having an indirect role for the plagues and hardship Egypt suffered during the Exodus. The pharaoh of the Exodus is a little harder to discern due to the fact that knowing the exact years that a successor became pharaoh and not a co-regent is not always easily known. Tutmosis IV is the most likely candidate for being that pharaoh, although his father Tutmosis III may have been the one. What is certain is that the Exodus occurred during the time of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. Chariot wheels found in the Red Sea crossing area prove this. Hatshepsut had a vizier named Senenmut who disappears 4 to 2 years before her death and is never buried in the 2 tombs that were prepared for him. It is very interesting that the disappearance of Senenmut corresponds to the time that Moses fled Egypt. Thank you for your interest in this show, and may God bless and keep you.
The Revelation 13 podcast is hosted by Mike Hopwood and is a podcast dedicated to the study of end-time events, news events, and ancient mysteries.